Hello everybody, I'm Ian Abernethy, and in this video I want to talk about heel up or heel down when we throw punches. It's discussed a lot within the traditional martial arts world, whether it's better to do one or the other. You see lots of people make very firm, convinced arguments on one or the other. So cards on the table right from the off, I think both are legitimate. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you look at like the two extremes, so let's take boxing, right? So in boxing, if they clinch one another, it tends to stop. They're not allowed to throw. There's no takedowns. When boxers move, they tend to have the weights on the balls of their feet. We even use that phrase in everyday English. If you need someone to respond to something quickly, we'll say, oh yeah, that'll keep you on your toes, meaning your weight needs to be on your toes and your heels need to be off because we move more efficiently that way. And that's good for when we've got a bit of distance and we're pulsing back and forth. If you look at judo players, they tend to keep the feet flatter because stability is obviously a more pressing issue in judo. As traditional karateka, we're going to need to be able to use both. The advantage of letting the heel up is it gives you more power. It definitely gives you more power. Again, you look at boxing, Thai boxing, MMA, they all do this. In karate, as I was taught, we always did this. When we didn't have hold of the enemy, we would lift the heels off the ground as we punch. We would rotate more. The fact that the heel's coming off allows the hip to rotate more. We get more body weight in the strike and we hit harder. The argument against that people get is the one of stability. Now, as I just mentioned, that has legitimacy if you're talking about the enemy pushing into you. Or, you've got hold of the enemy in some way. And lifting the heel off would mean that you're unable to kind of absorb the force that might be coming into you. But if you haven't got that, if the enemy's not pushing into you in any way, then taking the heel off is totally fine. Now, some people think there's an inherent problem with that because they talk about, well, if your heel's off the ground when you hit the target, the back shock comes in. Newton's laws, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The back shock comes into you, and if your heel's off the ground, then you're not stable to absorb that back shock, and that's complete nonsense. All right, that's physically wrong. That's bad physics. And the reason it's bad physics is, well, again, people point to Newton's law, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. But the misunderstanding it, and I think the best analogy of this, which everyone will relate to, is if you think of a cue ball. So if you're playing pool or snooker and you hit the cue ball, and the cue ball shoots across the table and it hits another ball. So a ball is round. You couldn't have something more unstable, right? You can tap it in any direction, it'll move very easily. When the cue ball hits the other ball, it goes, it stops and that one shoots on. It doesn't go bang when they bounce back. And the reason it doesn't do that is, let's say, let's make it simple. It's going forwards with 100 units of force. When it hits the other cue ball, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So you had 100 units of force and now there's been a collision. So there's 100 units of force. Let's ignore the kind of, some of it will be distortion of the balls and everything else and the friction of the table, but let's, kind of forget all that and make it as simple as we can. If you had 100 units of force going forwards and it hits an object, you've got to have 100 units going back into it. So guess what that object does? 100 going forwards added to minus 100 equals 0. So the back shock on the cue ball is 0. It doesn't hit and bounce back, it stops. So when we throw a punch into a target and the back heel's off the ground, the back shock is primarily used, so the equal and opposite reaction is primarily used to slow down the force of the strike. So when you hit the guy's head or you hit his chest, what happens is that the target moves and morphs, the back shock comes in towards the arm and it slows the punch down. That's what happens. That's what stops the punch. And for a good punch, that's what you want to have happen. You don't want to be stopping the punch. You don't want your kind of snap back or muscular contraction or anything. You want the enemy's mass to stop the punch. So as much energy goes into that as possible. So back on point, you don't need to worry about keeping your heel down on the floor for this, this fictional back shock. It doesn't exist. Again, you can watch a Newton's cradle. We've talked about Newton's laws. Drop one ball down, it swings. It's a swinging thing. It couldn't be more unstable. Hits the other ball. This one stops. Other one shoots off. That's what happens when you hit. Okay, the mass of the enemy slows down the strike. I think the reason so many traditional martial artists, buy into this myth of this fabled back shock is because they hit the makiwara a lot. So when you hit the makiwara, it's nothing like a person. It doesn't move or morph like a person. But when you hit the makiwara, it bends, and then as it tries to come back, it's trying to bend back. So it's not the back shock of the blow. Right? When you hit the makiwara, it was the back shock slowed down the strike. But when you hold it there afterwards, it's the makiwara wanting to return to its position. That doesn't happen when you hit people. So I think people spend a lot of time hitting the makiwara and they go, very important, you keep your heel down. Got to keep your heel down. Got to deal with the back shock. It's bad physics. You take that to hitting a human being, your heel can be off. The only reason you'd want it down is if the enemy was moving in towards you in some way. So you're holding them, they're moving towards you, you lock that back foot so you can avoid getting bowled over and then you can hit. So again, is it good to keep the heel off? Take the heel off if you're generating, if the aim is to generate power and stability is not a pressing concern at that moment. The other one is, is it good to keep the heel down? Yep, it's good to keep the heel down if stability is an issue at that moment. But keeping the heel down has nothing to do with power generation or redirecting the energy into the part. That's another one you get. So, the energy comes in and then you redirect the energy. Well, again, that's a violation of the laws of physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. You can't make that action unequal by maintaining a stance so less force comes into you and more goes into them. You can't do that. It's a violation of the laws of physics. So yeah, heel up or heel down, I would say that both have legitimacy and both should be practiced. It depends on what's happening tactically at that moment. For those who are still unconvinced, that you can strike properly with the heel off. Again, I'd ask you to watch a boxing bout, and you can see it there all the time. But if you're still unconvinced, I would ask you this question. How do kicks work? Right? If you throw a kick into a target, you're on one foot. You couldn't be in a more unstable position, right? But they work. It's not like when we kick people, we immediately fall over. And the reason is because when the foot hits the target, the back shock, if you like, the equal and opposite reaction is taken in slowing down the velocity of the foot. That's what happens, okay? It's the force that goes back in. Jumping punches work. The Superman punch, people knock people out with all the time. You're in the air. You don't need this fictional idea of you need this super rooted, stable stance. You don't. You don't need it to generate power, but you may need it tactically in order to maintain stability, which is why we see it in Kata a lot, because we're often fighting at close range. So yeah, the question, heel up or heel down, it depends. There's no universal best answer. And I would say practice both. If it's more appropriate to have the heel up, have it up. If it's more appropriate to drop the body weight and have the heel down, have it down. There's no universal right or wrong on this one. It depends on the specific situation you're in at that moment.